Hi, I'm Kristen, and today I'll be talking about sentient plasmoids. And I thought about talking about this today because I had an experience last night on July 15th, 2026, at around 9 p.m. with a orb that turned into something else. And it just really brought this idea of sentient plasmoids back into my mind. And this was something that David Grush spoke about not too long ago when he was at his press conference. So to kind of get into what I saw last night, I was standing outside and I was kind of looking out to the west, where like a lot of satellites and a lot of orbs seem to come from. And I was just kind of like thinking to the sky, and I was thinking like, oh, I could sure use help with this and with that, and I'd really love to be able to help other people, but I just don't feel like I have the capacity to do so right now, in the specific ways that I would like to help. And I kind of just looked up and I was like, is there help for me? Is there any kind of assistance that I should be kind of looking for, waiting on? And coming out of the west, there was just like this little tiny pure white orb or light that appeared in the sky. And typically when that happens, it looks a lot like a satellite. So I didn't think too much of it. And so I just kept watching it, and it kind of came almost right to me and came right in my direction. And then it turned and it pivoted. So instead of going from west to east, it started going from south to north. And so as I was watching this little orb, it started flaring up like super, super bright. And so it started having like rays of light that were coming off of it. And as it got brighter and brighter, it took on the shape of like a boomerang. And so it was just like kind of like this long, wide V shape, and with like the point of the V like pointing down at me. And still, as it was forming like this V shape, there was still rays of light coming off of it, but it seemed like all of the rays of light were like coming downwards. And so I didn't have glasses on, so I was thinking like in the moment, like is are my glasses refracting the light in some way? But I wasn't wearing any. I had contacts in, and so these rays of light were like almost like spilling out or coming out in like sharp points, like just in the direction of the point of the boomerang. And then as it kept on going north, like it stayed at a steady kind of like slow speed. It like got really really dim, and like the boomerang shape itself like came back into the sphere or the ball shape, and it dimmed out and then just like completely disappeared while I was looking at it. And this is not the first time that I have seen a shape, but with specifically the boomerang, I don't quite know what to make of it as far as symbolism. I know that a lot of other people have seen like these boomerang shaped craft that are like solid heavy pieces of what looks like metal, when people see them, but I haven't heard too many people talking about seeing like these kind of like light boomerangs. And there have been other occasions that I've spoken about on this channel before where I saw like an orb or a light kind of form into something else, or just like appeared as like something geometric. So a couple of years ago, I saw um, what looked like a light box, and it was like a wide rectangle that was like empty in the center, but it was made out of like light plasma. And then the two sides like came together and then like formed one line in the center as they came together, and it kind of like looked like shutting doors of like almost like at the front of a store. And I knew at that moment that it was like doors closed, like ended, and that I wouldn't be having any more contact at that point, and that ended up being true. And so for months I didn't have any contact. Then more recently this summer, I've seen just over the back of my property, over my woods, I saw like this very long, again like very skinny rectangle made out of plasma light. And that one, I also didn't really know what to think of it. It was so skinny, it didn't particularly look like a door, but it could have been a bit almost like a rectangular portal or something was appearing like massive in the sky above my trees. So I thought a lot about like what does this mean? What is going on? And it just seems like everything kind of goes back to orbs and apparitions and just everything being plasma and plasma being conscious. And so I've also mentioned this before. I've seen an apparition in the cemetery where at first I was chasing like this little orb that was like grayish bluish plasma and like kind of like swirling a bit through a cemetery. It turned 90 degrees and went shot to the back of the cemetery, and then um, after it disappeared, like a couple minutes later, a full solid apparition was like kind of standing in front of me, just like materialized in the middle of the cemetery. And so in that instance, being in that position, I instantly knew like that little ball turned into this man. And it was just like very obvious. There was like kind of like no way to rationalize around it, just because I was standing there. There was nobody that walked up, and there was no way that somebody could just appear like that and just out of thin air. I just connected the two. And there's been like a lot of discussion about how plasma itself could just be like the consciousness of the universe or the consciousness of our reality, and even like when we exit our bodies, that we essentially, like our souls, our higher selves, just like our energetic bodies, like they turn into these orbs, they turn into these pieces of just conscious plasma. And I have had a dream about that before too, where I was kind of astral projecting and I was floating over my neighborhood, flying over it, and it was very peaceful. It was beautiful. And as I got back to the field next to my home, I kind of was settling in and I didn't have a body. Like I could look down below me and I just saw nothing. But as I was like looking out around me, I could see that there were these other orbs in this astral state. And I knew that that was other people that were out of body or astral projecting at the same time as me, that were kind of like in my area. It was just, I guess, very trippy kind of sensation to have like that deep instant knowledge of like what was going on, like what I was doing, and how I probably also looked like a just like a ball of light to these other beings and other people that were kind of outside of their bodies at the same time. Yeah, so like a lot of research has been done on this, and so I just kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit today. And so I saw that there is this author and neuroscientist, Ron Joseph. He works for cosmology.com, and he's written several papers between 2024 and this year 2026, specifically about sentient plasma. And so he said that he believes that plasmoids are the fourth domain of life, and that plasma formations display communication, self-organization, replication, and potentially consciousness. He also says that they are autonomous electromagnetic organisms. And so that's something interesting that he really got into, that talks about it as far as like just the, I guess, like the plasma appearance of the orb that he's seeing like within NASA footage, is that they appear like cell-like. So he said they have structure like biological cells, and he said that that plasma double layers function like cell membranes. And so that was just like really interesting because I have seen orbs like very much up close. Again, I've seen one like right like inside my home. I've seen like an orb like inside my apartment, like when I lived in a different state, just like going along the floor. And again, I saw this like little orb like in a cemetery, like right next to me. And they do have like this kind of, yeah, it's like a swirling, almost like when you're looking at direct footage of the sun, and it's like the sun is made of plasma, and it kind of like has this like slow swirl to it. Like that's what an orb kind of looks like, even though you could see that it's like moving intelligently. um yeah, just very very strange. And something I also noticed when I was looking into his research is that he might have like kind of an explanation for like the twin orbs that we've been seeing a lot in like these war.gov federal releases of kind of like just orb footage. So many of those videos, it shows like two orbs moving along together, and it's just like there's two again, and there's two again, and there's two again. And so Ron Joseph said that he's seen plasma, quote, reproduce in NASA footage, and he says it elongates, it constricts, and separates, very similar to cellular mitosis, where cells gain sufficient electromagnetic energy and they divide into two stable offspring. And it's so many times when I was thinking about those twin orb videos, because there's so many of them, I kept on thinking it's like, oh well, maybe it's a superior and somebody who is like kind of like lower on the chain trying to learn about humanity, like kind of moving together and like watching and recording and doing these things. Or like maybe it is just like twin souls, or it's like just partners or family members, or just like people that are part of like soul families and they're like moving together. Just however you want to cut it, just like essentially like two beings, two consciousnesses, like choosing to come together for a specific reason, either just to kind of enjoy themselves together while they're doing something together here on Earth or in our reality, or either to like again like work on some kind of research or learning that they're doing. It didn't really occur to me that these things could like literally be splitting and creating offspring like we see with cells. But that's very, I don't know, it's just very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. I don't believe we've seen any kind of orbs like actively splitting, but I think that this researcher has watched that. I have seen this kind of orb footage where we see this kind of like plasma ball, and it seems to drip, and then the drippings can actually be collected from the ground afterwards. Or we do see kind of like one large ball kind of like spitting out other smaller ones. And that was shown in either federal release number 2 or 3 that came out, I believe, where the um, federal government, I believe the FBI, had somebody illustrate kind of like what one of their officers or one of their employees had seen when he was down on the ground, and he was just like showing that there was like this large, I believe, orange orb, and it was making or spitting out like little red ones. So I guess like you could kind of think that there was some kind of reproduction going on there with that. But yeah, it's like I never really thought about the twin orbs themselves just being two parts of a whole that had just split into two parts, and then possibly they could go back together. But very interesting to think about. And then the other author researcher that I wanted to touch upon today, I have his book. His name is Robert Temple, and he wrote A New Science of Heaven. And so that book is described as how the science of plasma will transform humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. And so this guy is kind of a controversial kind of author because he's like written about ancient aliens and how like ancient civilizations have been affected by like kind of much more advanced technology than we give them credit for. And so some people kind of write him off and say, oh, like, oh, he's like a Graham Hancock or lower down the totem pole than even Graham Hancock. But this book was interesting, and so I haven't read it thoroughly from end to end, but I have kind of skipped around, like skipped over a lot of the like the real scientific basis of plasma kind of chapters, and I went to specifically what he was focusing on with sentient plasma and sentient plasmoids. And so he frequently cited this author called Winston Bostick, who researched plasmoids, and he said the complex behavior of giant plasmoids from the sun suggests that they could be intelligent or conscious. And so he was mentioning like just the complexity of the sun is so impossible to kind of get a grip on that Temple actually questioned if the sun could be controlling Earth's atmosphere directly by talking to it. And I mean, I've heard this many, many times before. There are so many solar flares that are happening on the sun, and pretty much any one of these that happens on an almost daily basis, if it was facing the Earth, it could end up causing a Carrington level event. But it just seems like every time this happens, it's not facing the Earth. It's like it's slightly glancing off of us. It's slightly around us. And it's just the odds are so phenomenally low that we would be avoiding all of these bursts facing us that are of that magnitude. It's that it's almost like the sun is consciously deciding like I'm not going to send a flare out in that direction and affect the Earth. It's so again, just I know this is kind of separate from the idea of orbs and non-human intelligence, but the idea of the sun itself being this humongous plasmoid intelligence, like that was really interesting. And then Temple also said that Bostick worked in a laboratory to make plasmoids spiral into rings, and then the rings either attracted or repelled. And so he said that these plasmoids appeared to be mating. And when they were attracted to each other, they would latch onto one another. They would form into like a kind of union, and then they would wind up into a spiral with a stable magnetic configuration. And so I'm not a scientist. I cannot tell you if all of this is happening because just the electromagnetic forces that are happening within like this kind of environment that the plasmoids are put into, if that is just naturally causing these spirals. But it was mentioned like further on in the book that again there is very obvious plasmoids put into a similar space, and where the researchers would expect them to like naturally gravitate to each other based on magnetics, it wasn't happening. It said that it was almost like the plasmoids themselves were conscious, and like if they were coming in contact with another one or coming towards another one, it would note and almost like react and move in a conscious way to like get away from the other one if it didn't want to be near it, even if it was composed of the exact same kind of like plasma structure as a different plasma. It's like again, like human beings, we're all made of like kind of the same stuff. But people are obviously attracted or not attracted to certain people, and it was pretty much saying that like this is how plasmoids also act, which is just so bizarre. And then in general observations of plasma, Temple said that they take on characteristics of living beings. So plasmas feed on fresh plasma. They're nourished by solar wind. He said they swarm like microbial beings, and they seethe with their own internal structures created by magnetic fields with sheaths and voids like organs within animals. So when I read that, I found it a little bit confusing because obviously our organs aren't voids, but I think he was kind of trying to describe the appearance of plasma, how it kind of has these little segments and dark spots. If you've ever seen an orb yourself up close, where it seems like those spots would almost like look like you're looking at an X-ray of like where different organs would be. So I kind of get where he's coming from, and I just hope that I'm properly interpreting that. But what really stuck out to me out of like the whole book, when I was like looking specifically for how plasmas use consciousness to change their shape, Temple said that plasmas form patterns such as hexagonal structures, spirals, concentric circles, and double helixes. And they also form nerve-like filaments that may carry energy. And so, again, that doesn't really kind of touch on the boomerang that I saw, which is like a very kind of definitive shape that's not super geometric. What he is saying there, it does touch on like kind of like the doors that I've seen. So when I saw that wide rectangle that closed on itself, and when I saw this long skinny rectangle over my woods, that would kind of fit into the geometric kind of pattern that he was talking about. And then just to go like one little tiny step further, we've seen like these kind of sentient orbs like over New Jersey, the New Jersey drone scandal, which as far as I know, it's still ongoing, and it's just all media outlets have been told like stop covering it, don't cover it anymore. It's like it's alarming people and we don't have answers. But there's so many videos, and even still, like especially on TikTok, people are putting up videos of like living in southern Connecticut, living in Jersey and New York, and they're still going out near the water and they're seeing these orbs coming in from over the ocean, and they are turning into drones. They are turning into tiny little helicopters. They're turning into planes, and like in some cases, there are glitches with how they appear, and the orb is forming into a helicopter that might be missing a propeller or two, or they're turning into drones that don't have any kind of mechanism of keeping themselves in the air, so you don't see any of like these tiny kind of blades or anything like that. Or they're turning into like even very small planes, like what looks like high altitude, like hobby planes, except they might be missing engines. And so yeah, there's like a lot of just really high strangeness that's going on, that people are capturing this on film and capturing it on video and showing like what the hell is going on. I'm watching this ball that is now elongated or blinked into turning into something else, except the something else is kind of like a little bit off. And again, just kind of shows like how kind of sentient and capable these beings are, that they can try to replicate and appear as something else that they are not. Just like with all of these shapes that they make and ways that they are trying to kind of get messages across by turning into something else. And so yeah, it's just really interesting. I have like so many thoughts on like what on earth is going on. I can only speculate, as we all can. Since I've seen these like shape shifting pieces of plasma, I personally believe that it is so conscious, and it's so reactive to thoughts, and it's so kind of like projecting a message, like with knowing, like almost like a mini download, that I personally think it is like some kind of non-human intelligence or spirit of some sort that is in its like energetic form that is able to do this. But there's also the chance that it's just like what we would consider to be not something like a gray turning into an orb, or a mantid or a Nordic, or something that is its energetic body becomes an orb, but it could be something that is just so foreign to us that it generally just, it never takes on another form unless it's replicating to send a message. And so these plasma entities could just exist as spheres all of the time and never really incarnate, I guess, if you want to say that. Or they might just exist as like these like rods or spirals, and they just communicate and live like that, just in their own part of the universe, like almost like hyper intelligent kind of snake lightning bolts or something like that. And just before I close this out, there was one meditation that I did probably about a year and a half ago, probably closer to a year and a half, where I had closed my eyes and I saw that I was kind of like standing in this space, like almost like a rocky or empty kind of like dirt area or parking lot, like at dusk or like right after dusk. So everything was dark, and I could see some trees like in the background. And what had appeared to me was like, it just like looked like a long plasma ray that was slightly twisted at the top, and it was like glowing super super bright. And yeah, it's like if I tried to like put some kind of like size or scale onto it, I would say, based on kind of like what I was shown in my mind, it almost seemed like it was maybe like 5 to 10 feet long, except like hovering in the air. Just very strange. But yeah, it was like It definitely had a part that was like straightened out, and then the other part was like kind of twisted up and like malformed. And that stuck out in my mind of like, why on earth are they showing me that? And I'm just like now like realizing, like, really, especially over the past year, that it's like, oh, that could have been an actual message from a being that just exists as plasma, exists as like this kind of long stretched out piece of just energy. Yeah, it's really interesting. So if you've ever had any kind of interactions with these kind of sentient plasmoids, or just plasma in general, that you've thought like, this is really strange, it's definitely out of the norm, it's possibly conscious, please let me know. So thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.